All right, well, welcome to another episode here of Bound by Banking. Today we are joined by Mickey Belle Shields-Manley. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're very excited to have you today. So, I guess to get us started, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background, your experience. So, I'll hand it over to you and kind of let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you. My name is Mickey, like he said. I work for CS Bank. We're based out of Eureka Springs, Arkansas. We're roughly $625 million in assets. So, mid to smaller level community bank. I've worked here at CS Bank for almost 7 years. I started in college, fell in love with banking. Wasn't thinking I was going to fall in love with banking, but it became a passion of mine and just kind of fell right into the mix. But some more personal things about me. I love to travel. I'm an avid reader. I love reading. I love reading pretty much all genres, but I especially like self-help books. And
Okay.
then I also have just recently picked up a new hobby. My goal in 2026 was to take some intentional time to be offline, just due to the fact that I feel like I'm constantly online for work. A lot of times I would take maybe my work home with me, and so kind of trying to unplug a little bit. So I've picked up needle pointing, which is
I
kind of
love that.
I fondly call it my grandma hobby. But I've really enjoyed being able to like stay offline and like get better with my motor movements and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, hopefully the needlepoint goes well. I think that sounds kind of cool and interesting.
Thank you.
Uh,
I'm on project number 2 right now. I'm getting better, but
Hey,
I,
takes time.
definitely not ready to sell it yet or anything like that.
Very good. Yeah, anything that you can enjoy doing and sometimes something that you can put the phone down. So I
Yeah,
love it. So, well, very cool. Were you ready to dive into some questions?
let's do it.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. So, first question I have for you today is I feel like a lot of community and regional banks come to us today asking, oh, we want to stay competitive. What does that mean? And when you think about that, when you hear that?
Yeah. So coming from a smaller institution, first thing that comes to mind is staying competitive doesn't necessarily equate trying to be the largest bank in the market. Sometimes it just means being the most relevant and being the most down to earth,
Hmm.
talking to people in the way that they're receptive to, talking at our community's level. Because a lot of times I feel like as bankers, we're really bad about doing banker talk and talking in acronyms and
Hmm.
all this like smart banker talk. And I know even personally, I've taken a look back at my work and thought, okay, am I talking at the level of our consumer, or am I talking above their head and talking in only further adding to that intimidating persona that banks oftentimes carry? I think we have to deliver two things, and we have to balance them equally, and that's delivering the personal relationship-based service that people are expecting from a local bank, but also meeting those modern expectations around convenience, speed, security. Um, and I think you can break that down into three kind of separate pillars. Obviously, customer expectations have changed. Jeff Bezos famously talks about the fact that in every meeting that they have at Amazon, that they leave a chair open for the consumer.
Yep.
And unfortunately, as I mentioned, Amazon banks are no longer compared to the bank across the street. The speed, the service, the ease is compared to just their best experience period in a story. So for me, being in Northwest Arkansas, Walmart's in my backyard. So oftentimes as a bank, we're compared to Walmart. Walmart does everything. They're an
Hmm.
all-in-one store. So we like to call ourselves an all-in-one bank. We've got all of our different division lines, but unfortunately, sometimes we're held to those standards of those large, billion, trillion dollar kind of industries, even though, we are a smaller shop. So making sure that we're standing out in the way that we can stand out. I mentioned that I love self-help books. Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great, and he talks about his hedgehog concept. And it's basically that businesses need to figure out where they stand out and then become excellent in that area. And so, as our community bank, we stand out in our service level. I feel like we also stand out in all the different division lines that we carry. Um, so, I think to stay competitive, we need to be uniquely us, and we need to be uniquely us in the positioning of what we do in our marketing, and making sure that our customers can clearly say CS Bank's it factor is XYZ thing. You know, bank across the streets it factor is XYZ thing. We can't be everything to everyone, but we can be everything to someone. So finding that market and making sure that we're providing to those people as their expectation level, as they set those expectations for us.
Okay. No, that's and that I love that answer because I think it's a very good point of kind of finding that niche and sticking to it. I
Mhm.
mean, I feel like a lot of times banks may fall under the trap of comparison. You know, as they
Oh
say,
yeah.
comparison is the thief of joy.
Mhm.
And so you've got to figure out, okay, what are we good at? What do we really want to focus at? And then just make sure you're doing it to the absolute best that you can.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Very cool. Great answer. Very good answer. Okay, so let me ask you this question. We've seen some trends over the last, 4 or 5 years that marketing is really starting to play a more important role into the banking community and the banking industry. And so we're starting to see advertising dollars really start to increase year over year, but we've seen a steady trend of the teams who manage that flatline. Like they're not
Mhm.
increasing. So, what advice would you give to some other banks or bank marketers who are trying to grow without burning themselves out?
Yeah. And I think that's so easy as a marketer to do is I feel like marketers are visionaries, they're change makers, they're excited people. And so it's easy to come on so strong and then kind of trickle out. So I think it's finding that middle ground where you can sustain that momentum. If I were advising another bank, I'd say this: sustainable growth comes from focus, rhythm, and alignment, not a constant sense of urgency. If it seems like the house is always on fire, that's going to cause burnout quickly. If every day you're coming in and you're having to pivot and there's burnout and there's something new, it doesn't only cause burnout for the marketing department, but it also burns out the bank as a whole.
Hmm.
A lot of times I think of like the frontline staff. The frontline staff is so often the ones that are, fielding questions. They're getting the customers that are coming in from the direct mail campaign or the calls on the email campaign. We need to cash in on, whatever it is that's being advertised. And, if they're constantly also feeling like there's not clarity and there's more confusion, that doesn't only cause burnout, it causes internal friction as well. So I think sometimes burnout can be because, goals are too vague.
Hmm.
Grow deposits, grow customers. That's not a plan, that's more so a direction. And so getting everybody on the same page because things that scale without pushback are the ones that define the exact behaviors they're trying to create. And so rather than growing deposits, okay, so are we looking to increase direct deposits? Are we increasing online account openings? Are we trying to build deeper relationships and get multi-product households? What defining more so you've got your plan and that's important, but now we need to know how to execute the plan. What from the highest level of the bank is the goal in increasing those deposits? And then let's pursue relentlessly to make those goals happen. And a lot of that happens with some hand holding, making sure that as the marketing department, that there's, proper training for frontline staff, holding hands with those department lines to ensure that that training is happening, making sure that you're organized as a marketing unit. I think sometimes burnout can be avoided by being wise stewards of our own time and making sure that we're hitting the deadlines that we need to hit to make sure that we're not facing unnecessary stress. A lot of stress can be alleviated through managing our time just
Hmm.
slightly better. um, And like I said, stop running the marketing department like a fire department.
Yeah.
I've seen teams burn out because every week, there's a new emergency, there's something's on fire, there's a new promo, a new request, a new idea, a new push. And a lot of times that kills creativity, but it also kills quality.
Yep.
And not that there's not going to be those weeks that you come in and, something happens over the weekend that you weren't expecting. That does happen, but control the things that you can control. And, don't be an order taker as well. I think a lot of times, sometimes as marketers, we're really quick to just say, and let me get back to my office and I'll do it. It's okay to come with questions to the table and also come with respectful pushback in terms of saying, hey,
Yep.
if you want XYZ results, then I'm going to have XYZ amount of time to one, make this a successful campaign, not let it be a waste of everybody's time, and also be a good steward of, your financial institution's money, because, you're funneling money into these campaigns, and when done right, marketing is not a cost center. Marketing is a revenue generator. So making sure that we're being thoughtful with those timelines to ensure that the reputation of marketing also stays intact.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. You were talking about kind of the knowledge of what you can and can't control, and it reminded me of the Serenity Prayer. And that's something that I try to remind myself daily.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about goals and things like that, the SMART goals is one of my favorite things. I love to
Yeah.
try to break things down like that. And one of the most things I feel that gets often overlooked is the A. And so it's like, are these expectations realistically achievable?
Mm-hmm.
Um, can I can't have somebody come to me and say, hey, I want the moon in 6 weeks. Well, that's just not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And so making sure that you have everything like that, I think it's a good point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, okay, let's move on to next question here for you. With marketing, there's a lot of new tools, new softwares, new innovations that seem to come out very often, sometimes almost on a daily basis, it seems
Mm-hmm.
like. So, how do you go about the innovation with your bank while also focusing on the fundamentals?
Yeah. I think, like you said, it seems like all the time you're seeing, especially these large fintechs that are now acting as banks, where they've got, all these flashy products all the time, that it seems like they're just, like you said, every single day, that there's something new that they're, unveiling. And like we mentioned before, we're held to that same standard of that same accountability level of, XYZ fintech has, this product, why don't you have it yet? And so I think the best innovation in banking doesn't come from chasing the trends. It comes from solving real problems. So
Mm,
as marketers, like we talked about, having that seat open in the meeting that, signifies that customer, and understanding the true pain points that our customers might be dealing with, stepping outside of ourselves as marketers, stepping outside of ourselves as bankers. Sometimes it's so easy, and I fall victim to it, as I know many others do as well, of, all of a sudden, as the banker, we're the expert on the consumer, when oftentimes, sometimes we are so nose blind because we're in it every single day, that we might not be near the expert on the consumer as what we think. So it's taking time to step outside of ourselves and think, as a consumer, what is my expectation? Take that banker hat off, put that consumer hat on, and say,
hmm
I know as a banker what I want to sell these people, or what I want these people to adopt. But as a consumer, does that actually make sense? Is that something that I would actually utilize from my bank? I know a lot of times, Gen Z gets thrown out there. I'm Gen Z. I'm 26 years old. And, Gen Z is an enigma to the banking community, especially. But I feel like that Gen Z is an enigma to probably every industry in some
yeah.
capacity. But, it's for me, I always say, I'm a little bit nose blind to how Gen Z's bank, because I work at a bank. So I am working with people that are older than me, that are mentoring me, that, talk finances with me. So, I'm a little bit nose blind to it. So it's taking that time to step outside of ourselves, put that consumer hat on, ask the important questions, not just think that we know it all because we work at it all the time, but, making sure that, if we're investing in products, that the investment makes sense, and that in turn, if we're gonna talk financials, that investing in this product is also going to bring the return back to the bank. Are people actually going to adopt it, or is it just cool to say that we have it? And if it's just cool to say that we have it and people aren't actually adopting it, it's not that cool to say that we have it. Um, so, we ask ourselves, does this improve access? Does it reduce friction? Does it increase confidence in the bank? And if it doesn't do any of those things, it's probably not the right project for us to invest our time in. That's what, also furthers the burnout, is when we spend our time in the places that maybe aren't important to the bank or not important to the consumer. So leading, especially as a community bank, it's in the name, leading everything with our community in mind and making sure every single decision that we're making comes with them first and us second.
Yeah. And your point there about putting on the consumer hat, I think is very important thing, because I feel like that's sometimes something that we forget to do. As somebody in the marketing industry, in the banking industry, we may see a tool or a software and think it's the next greatest thing since
Mhm.
sliced bread.
Yeah.
Well, if the consumer doesn't care for it, they don't have a need for it, it's going to fall flat on its face. And we spent all this time and money and effort, like getting this thing ramped up, only for
Mhm.
it to just nothing.
Yeah.
Uh,
We
and
just
so,
we just experienced that at our bank,
yeah.
candidly. We adopted a product, and basically we were getting feedback from clients that, there was a pain point in a certain process. And we were like, you know what? If there's a pain that you're having, we are going to fix it. Let's figure out what the band-aid is. And we found what honestly is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful product. And we utilized it. We did all sorts of testing, A/B testing. I mean, anything that could work. And our customers weren't utilizing it.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, we did all kinds of over and over again, in-house training, is it us? Is it them? Why are our customers not adopting this product like we thought they would? And I finally sat down with one of our branch managers and I was like, hey, what is the feedback that you are getting? Because I'm not seeing the results here like I was expecting to see the results. And she made the comment of, customers said, this is awesome, but I'm still going to do it on my time for
Yeah.
this particular product. And for that reason, I think it's also important that as marketers, we don't try to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Hmm.
It's okay to fail as long as you're failing forward and you're learning from it. So while this wasn't, the perfect product for our client base, it doesn't mean it's not a perfect product for somebody. It just wasn't us. And ultimately, we decided, to gather ourselves. We decided to pivot. We're no longer utilizing that product. We stopped investing in it. But I think it's also important to be realistic with ourselves and not try to force customers to use the thing that to them is not the convenience that we thought it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that customer feedback, I think, is detrimental to
Mhm.
learning and growing. And like you said, it's okay to fail, but as long as we're picking ourselves back up and moving forward.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I love it. Great point. So, all right. Well, last question here. I won't keep you too much longer. What is a big misconception that maybe people outside the industry still have about modern banking?
Yeah, I think, and again, I keep bringing it back to the fact that we're a true family-owned community bank, and so I think a lot of times the misconception for us is that because we're a community bank, family-owned for the last almost 114 years, that we must be outdated. It must be paper statements and all kinds of behind the times products. And the reality is that modern banking is extremely digital. It's extremely regulated and incredibly focused on protecting our customers. And it does not matter the bank's size. I've seen banks far smaller than us be, incredibly innovative, and I've seen banks far larger than us be less innovative. And so we pride ourselves on being what we feel is a digitally forward bank in terms of we're very open to innovative thought process. We have a vice president digital technology officer here at our bank. So I think a lot of times maybe the misconception might be is that oh, you're a smaller bank, so you might not be able to service all my needs.
Hmm.
And so we always are making sure that we're reminding people like, hey, just because you're the biggest bank don't automatically assume that equals best tools or best experience. Community banks and even regional banks can absolutely deliver that, modern digital convenience with the added advantage of having a real relationship and local decision making for your relationship with the bank. We get a lot of feedback about that here at the bank once we get customers in our door. Of you have so much more technology or all of these more innovative products that can service me in my business, or makes my my personal banking relationship so much easier. We take pride on that, and we work really hard to nurture that. But that comes from the top down, and we're very blessed at our institution to have a CEO and a C-suite that is 100% of the time leaning into innovation. You're never going to bring something up and people are going to scoff. Bring something up and we're at least going to investigate it. And so it's really great to know that not only do I work for an institution, but I also bank with an institution that's always open to the conversation of how can we push the envelope while still protecting our customers' security, their privacy, and ultimately remaining a secure bank, and making sure that we're hitting all of those high points. But I would say, yeah, just the fact that people think that, the smaller the bank, the more in the dark ages you are. And from what I have been seeing and learning from peers in the industry, no matter, where they are geographically, is, sometimes it's the exact opposite. Sometimes it's the smaller the bank you are, the more innovative and more I don't want to say leniency, because there's always the structure of the regulations and whatnot that we have to abide by, but there's more open-mindedness in terms of the possibilities of what we can do for our clients.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's that fine balance of creating that community, creating that relationship, along with all of the online features, is where it's the best of both worlds, in my opinion. Because I'm part of a local community bank as well, and I'm still old school. I like to take my checks in, and
Mhm.
rather than doing them online. But there's a teller up there. I don't know her name, but I know her face, and
Yeah.
every time I walk in, I'm like, oh, I get talking with her. She's very nice and
Mhm.
friendly, but it just there's something about that comfort feeling
Mhm.
of knowing that, okay, if something ever happens, like, I'm sure they'll recognize me. I've been a part of them for many, many years, and so it's
Mhm.
like they are looking out for their consumers and their customers, and
Oh,
that sort of.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yeah, and that's, I think, now on as a banker, and thinking about previously before I was a banker, I understand why, when my parents set up my first bank account, why they chose a community bank. And I
yeah,
remember being like, no, there's this huge bank over here. Why would we not bank with them? And
yeah,
I remember my parents telling me that, building relationships is one of the most important things you'll ever do in your life, but certainly when it comes to your finances. And, I can't tell you the amount of times that, our lenders or our frontline staff on the teller line or our account openers or, insert, customer facing title. I mean, they are that, economic first responder for their customers. We, as community bankers, we hold their hands through many stages of life, the good, the bad, the in between. And I think as a community bank, that's a blessing, because people know that when the going gets tough, they can call insert lender's
hmm
name.
hmm
And that person, you're not going to be given an 800 number. You're going to get, our area code. You're going to get directly to them. They're going to get directly back to you if they can't get to you at that time. And we're going to figure out how to help you as best we can.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the wonderful thing about local and community banks, is that sort of that relationship and that trust. So
Absolutely.
very cool. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much today, Mickey, for joining. It was an absolute pleasure having you on today, and I loved hearing the insights and your thoughts and opinions on some of today's questions. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. An absolute honor.
Of course, of course. Well, have a good one. Bye, Mickey.
See you later.